So thanks everyone for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit today about privacy enhancing currencies and supply auditability. So for those that don't know, I'm Ricardo Spagni. You may know me as Fluffy Pony. There is my GPG key. That's, you've got to have your GPG key at the beginning of any serious presentation. I was the lead maintainer on the Monero core protocol for many years and stepped down last year. So now I'm no longer lead maintainer, I'm just a maintainer. I'm still heavily involved with Monero, but I spend a lot of time working on Tari, and I co-founded Tari Labs in order to build that. So today we're going to talk about what the actual issue is when it comes to supply auditability, what the options are and the trade-offs, and where does this actually leave us. So to start, let's talk a little bit about what the issue is. Now, as you know, Bitcoin is the gold standard in very many ways, especially when it comes to supply auditability, because you can see the amounts being transacted. And for many people, that is something that they actually want. Privacy enhancing cryptocurrencies like Monero obscure or hide the amounts using various methods. And this has led to the criticism that there could be hidden inflation risk, or there is hidden inflation risk that's associated with any privacy enhancing currency. And it's not an invalid claim, but there's a lot more nuance to it. So when it comes to this, a lot of people say that the reason that Bitcoin doesn't have this problem is because I can see the amounts and I can use a calculator. But that's a terrible baseline for auditability. I mean, think about it. If the baseline for us trusting any sort of cryptographic system is I can see the amounts and use a calculator, well, then we shouldn't be using hashes. We shouldn't be using private public key cryptography. We shouldn't be using anything that is maybe a little bit outside of our realm of understanding. And let's be honest, like we rely on all sorts of things, all sorts of mathematics that we don't understand, all sorts of cryptography that we don't understand, because we trust not only in the actual science behind it, but we trust in the implementation as well. So if we're going to really dig into this issue, because let's be clear, we do want soundness. We want soundness in our monetary system, but we need to understand what are the trade-offs, what are the actual problems that could arise. So when it comes to the supply auditability issue, there really are three problems that can arise. The first is you could have a cryptographic hardness assumption that breaks. The second is there could be detectable inflation due to an implementation flaw. And the third is there could be undetectable inflation due to an implementation flaw. So let's dig into these one at a time to really understand them. Firstly, a cryptographic hardness assumption breaks. What does that actually mean? Well, we rely on certain assumptions, like the discrete logarithm problem, when it comes to designing cryptographic systems. And obviously, if a cryptographic hardness assumption were to be broken by the existence of something like some sort of quantum computer with sufficient qubits and some hypothetical future where we're able to like extract energy from the core of the sun, or all of these other things that could possibly break some of these assumptions. In that world, in this future where this is broken, then an attacker could use this cryptographic break to print an infinite amount of Monero. Cool, we understand the problem. The issue here is if something like the discrete logarithm problem, if that assumption is broken, we have much bigger problems, like everything's broken. I mean, then we might as well just go back to like pen and paper and like sending letters around, because communication systems are disrupted, Bitcoin's in trouble, Monero's in trouble, everything's in trouble. Your websites are not going to work because TLS is broken. So the reality is, typically when it comes to cryptographic hardness assumptions breaking, I like to think that that's not really something that we need to worry ourselves with. The risk is cryptographically negligible. And frankly, by the time something like the discrete logarithm problem is challenged, genuinely challenged, we should be onto some other cryptographic system, maybe a post-quantum system or something that's got other hardness assumptions, which we hope won't be broken for, at least a couple of years. So the second one, detectable inflation due to an implementation flaw. Now, the thing is, this is really, I mean, you can see that the 2 and 3 are due to implementation flaws, and this is really where the issue lies, because you can have the best cryptography designed by the smartest cryptographers in the world, reviewed by thousands of researchers all over the world, and then the person implementing it, like, they make in the implementation, and that flaw can be exploited. So this is a lot more realistic, right? Okay, so here's the thing with detectable inflation. It's happened before. It's happened several times. It's happened with Bitcoin, and it's happened with Monero. It's happened twice with Bitcoin. It happened in August 2010 with Bitcoin's value overflow bug. It happened again more recently with Bitcoin's output double spend bug. And it happened with Monero's key image malleability bug in 2017. Okay, and in all three of these instances, it was detected and it was handled safely. Now, how? Well, with Bitcoin's value overflow bug, there was a soft fork to say, hey, these outputs that created billions and billions and billions of Bitcoin, they're invalid outputs. And so there were sort of two chains that existed simultaneously, and the ones with the billions and billions and billions of Bitcoin eventually fell by the wayside, and a much longer or much stronger chain was created, and that's the one that we use today. Bitcoin's output double spend bug and also Monero's key image malleability bug were sort of surreptitiously or discreetly fixed. So there was a fix that was pushed out without making it public. The error was, or the bug was picked up internally, either by Bitcoin or Monero developers, or reported in by somebody who found it without them going and reporting it publicly or abusing the bug. So this is great. Handled safely. This is fantastic. It was detected. It was handled. Here's the issue. What happens if in all three of these instances, in any one of them, with Bitcoin or with Monero, those extra funds that had been created were spent? So let's say that, let's take Bitcoin's output double spend bug, because it's a pretty recent one. So it gets spent and it gets, say, deposited to an exchange. Now it gets detected because, you know, like in some routine check or whatever, maybe, you know, using your eyes in a calculator, someone sees that something's gone wrong. But by the time that detection happens, it's likely going to be too late. And the reality is no one actually knows what to do if these funds are spent before detection. There have been many discussions about what if in Bitcoin and in Monero. And the reality is that every single possible proposal for dealing with this is ugly. It doesn't matter, you know, whether it is like, let's hard fork it out, let's soft fork it out, let's roll back the chain, Ethereum style. Any proposal for dealing with an incident of detectable inflation after it's been spent or after it's been abused is likely going to hurt legitimate users and services, and it's likely going to be catastrophic. So think about it. Imagine a scenario where even 1,000 Bitcoins created out of thin air, and it's now spent. It's deposited on an exchange. It was exchanged into Ripple and withdrawn. And the Ripple community are standing fast and they don't want to return those funds. What do you do? The hardness, the soundness of Bitcoin's monetary system is now threatened by the existence of these extra coins. You can't burn them because they've been bought by other traders who did not know they were buying illegitimate coins. You can't roll back the chain because that's going to threaten other transactions. It's really problematic. Okay, but let's be clear here. As long as the risk is found and fixed early, or the bug is found and fixed early, we can consider that risk to be pretty small. It's not negligible, but you know, it's happened on Bitcoin, it's happened on Monero, so we know it happens. But because of researchers typically using reporting systems like Monero uses HackerOne, and Bitcoin also has their own reporting system. Because of things like that, researchers tend to go and report bugs without abusing them or before they abuse them, and that's great. That is fantastic. It really reduces this risk. And I think also another aspect of this is most attackers know that if they abuse this, they might get away with it, and they might be able to take some profit in their creation of this infinite mint or this break in supply auditability, but they will probably destroy the entire cryptographic system. And in the case of Bitcoin, they'll probably take the entire cryptocurrency ecosystem down with them. So that's just like not great. I mean, that is a situation that you really do not want to have play out. Everyone loses. And I think attackers know this. So we can consider this risk to be pretty small. The last one is undetectable inflation due to an implementation flaw. Now, let's be clear here. This is a special class of attack that exclusively affects privacy-enhancing currencies. As we know, Bitcoin doesn't really have to worry about this because you can use your eyes in the calculator. Now, the thing with this is, again, there are no good ways of handling this. You have exactly the same problem because, maybe you never detect it. And then the person's gotten away with printing, free money. And maybe you detect it in the future through something like a turnstile. The problem with proposals like turnstiles is they don't really work. They just give an attacker this game theoretic advantage. Now, let me explain how a turnstile is supposed to work. So imagine you have a day, and leading up to that day, so this is a special date, 1st of January 2021, leading up to that date, everyone that uses Monero needs to reveal the amounts on chain. They don't need to reveal who they are, but they need to reveal their amounts. And if during the reveal of these amounts, we discover that they cryptographically reveal more than should exist, well, then we have a problem. And once we hit that turnstile, once we hit that point where there's too many coins that should exist, well, then we're just going to reject anything else that's trying to reveal its amounts, and only people who revealed their amounts up to that point will get to keep their coins. That's effectively the way a turnstile works. The problem with this is that it can be abused in a number of ways. For example, an attacker who has printed infinite money can just go and reveal all his outputs very early in the turnstile, and all the people who are late, who reveal it much later down the road, are the ones that end up they end up losing, right? Because now their coins are unspendable and the attacker wins. The other thing that an attacker could do is, again, just from a game theoretic perspective, he could encourage people to enter some sort of mixing pool or something like that to gain some sort of privacy advantage, and then as they enter, he can leave and go out through the turnstile and get coins to spend. And then when eventually those people go like, oh, it's now time for me to pull out of this mixing pool, well, too late, like their coins become unspendable because they've tripped the turnstile. So turnstiles are just not great. They give the attacker all sorts of game theoretic advantages. They don't actually solve the problem. So frankly, this issue is the real trade-off, because in that event, that's really the real problem that can't, where it's undetectable, that can't be fixed in an easy way, that if it is eventually detected, or if there is some methodology for detecting it, it like ends up hurting legitimate users. That's the real trade-off. And again, don't get me wrong, the risk is what I would consider to be quite small for the same reasons that the detectable inflation risk is small, but the risk does exist. So where does this leave us? Knowing all of this, where do we actually stand? Okay, so both non-private and private currencies face many of the same supply auditability risks. For example, cryptographic hardness assumptions. We rely on it, whether it is Bitcoin, Monero, or any other cryptocurrency, any other cryptographic system. We rely on these cryptographic hardness assumptions. And if they are broken, well, we're in much larger trouble than, an attacker can print infinite Monero or infinite Bitcoin. At the same time, if you consider things like a detectable inflation attack, that would be devastating as well, right? Because there's no great way to fix it. And this, I'm assuming, a detectable inflation attack that's already occurred, has already been exploited, and the funds have already been sent elsewhere. And so in view of that, we can conclude that a privacy-enhancing currency carries the very real risk of undetectable inflation, but it gives you powerful privacy. Great. On the other hand, a non-private currency doesn't come with guarantees for supply auditability, because we've seen with Bitcoin already, it's been exploited at least twice, or it has been exploited twice. And the supply auditability assumption has been broken. But in non-private currencies, it makes privacy much harder to achieve. Now, I want to be clear here. I am not suggesting at all that this is now a Bitcoin versus Monero debate or anything like that. I just think it's important to understand the trade-offs. And the reason that I'm doing this isn't because I think Monero is better than Bitcoin. It's because I think privacy is coming to Bitcoin, whether it is layer 2 privacy, whether it is through the excellent work of projects like Samurai Wallet, whether it's through Schnorr signatures. I think stronger privacy is coming to Bitcoin. And what I want to fight against, and what I think we should fight against, is the view that I've heard from a lot of people that privacy shouldn't come to Bitcoin. Bitcoin should never enhance its privacy because that could somehow compromise supply auditability. And I think that that's a bad assumption, because supply auditability is not guaranteed in Bitcoin right now. And if it is broken in future, again, through something like the ability to double spend a transaction output, by the time that is detected, it could be that an attacker's already done the initial spend. And then when the legitimate user comes along and they want to actually spend their transaction output, that's the double spend. And then it's too late. Then the supply auditability is wrecked, because that spend, that initial spend from the attacker, could be from months ago. So there are no supply auditability guarantees with Bitcoin anyway, at least not any that we really care about. And frankly, I think that the fact that you have this pretend supply auditability gain by having all the amounts visible, and you can whip out your Texas Instruments pocket calculator and add things up, is just not the way that we really should be dealing with things when it comes to trade-offs, because it's not a real supply auditability gain, and it just makes privacy that much harder to achieve. Now, what about in the future? Well, in the future, like I said, there are improvements that are possible, like a non-private currency like Bitcoin might give you sufficient privacy through level 2 systems like Lightning. I'm hoping that there will be this addition of on-chain privacy of some sort, and I'm hoping that the supply auditability thing of Bitcoin becomes less, or viewed as less important, and the trade-offs are properly understood. Similarly, a private currency like Monero might dramatically reduce some of the risk. For example, right now Monero uses Peterson commitments to hide the transaction amounts. We could switch to Elgamal commitments. There are some problems with that, for mostly around the size. Elgamal commitments have massive range proofs, but they are computationally hiding and perfectly binding, whereas Peterson commitments are the opposite. They are computationally binding but perfectly hiding. At the moment, we've chosen the one route because they're smaller, and you can use bulletproofs to even further massively reduce range proofs. But who knows, in the future, where bandwidth is nearly unlimited and bandwidth latency is extremely low, there might be another design constraint, or this might be a design constraint that's revisited. And it might be like, okay, well, maybe we want to switch to something that is, sort of leans a little bit more in the other way. And in fact, Grin already has something in place called switch commitments, where they are able to make the switch from Peterson to Elgamal in the future. So to recap, everything has unavoidable trade-offs and comes with precious few guarantees, if any. It's important for each of you individually to choose the set of trade-offs that makes the most sense for you. For some people, and I think this is true of many people at the conference and many people watching, that means choosing a privacy-enhancing currency and accepting the small risk that there could be undetectable inflation in future. For others, they are not prepared to accept that, and they want to be able to pull out their Texas Instruments pocket calculator and add up amounts on a block explorer, and that's fine. They'll trust other cryptographic systems in their cryptocurrency of choice, but they don't want to trust something like range proofs, and that's okay. I accept that, and I think it's important for each of us individually to choose which set of trade-offs we want. Most important, stay up to date with future improvements. That goes for downloading actual software updates, through to seeing what's happening in the landscape, in the research landscape, to see what's coming down the pipeline, because maybe the set of trade-offs that you've decided on might be good, well suited to you, for you today, but as new research is published, you might decide that another set of trade-offs makes a lot more sense. So I hope that I've given you some insight into supply auditability, where the trade-offs are, and what can be done in future. I thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to take questions.
Hello, hello. So
there we go.
okay, so can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
So Fluffy Bandit, thank you a lot for your really interesting presentation. Now it's a question time. So I'm going to ask firstly people here physically in the Institute of Crypto Anarchy. By the way, the room, the name of the room all people are sitting here, it's called Institute of Crypto Anarchy.
Nice.
Yeah. So any questions? Okay, there is one question.
Hello, I have a question about the trade-offs between privacy and auditability. Okay, let's see. I've been told to stand here so you can hear me. Okay, so I was just thinking that, of course, that fiat, for example, has very low auditability, and that's what made me think that maybe the trade-off is not, maybe the trade-off between privacy and auditability is not so important as just the fact that you just admitted that the auditability, that it's more possible than some people think to reduce the auditability of some currencies. Therefore, like, isn't it like a no compromise argument for some people to just not use anything if you can't ensure that actually there might be some, as you said, undiscoverable inflations?
Yeah, I think that for some people certainly some people certainly make that argument. You know, they make the argument that their particular set of trade-offs is to make sure that there is absolutely no risk to their monetary system at all. I think it's pretty clear now that even a sound monetary system, a hard money system like Bitcoin, could have supply auditability problems, and in fact has had supply auditability problems in the past. So I think it's important to understand that when people say, oh, hey, listen, I this is my requirement, I need hard money, I need total supply auditability, that it's important that they understand what that actually means, that they're not getting that with Bitcoin. They're not getting that with traceable currencies at all. They're definitely getting self-sovereignty, they're definitely getting all sorts of other benefits, but I think it's important that we not pretend that supply auditability issues cannot exist just because amounts are visible.
Okay, thanks a lot. Some other questions? Okay, maybe online. So, okay. So there is one question. Okay, wait a moment. Okay. Okay, so the question is, do you think an asset's used primarily as a store of value, which is like a Bitcoin current trajectory, or method of exchange, Monero's current trajectory, change the priorities for privacy versus easy auditability? That's the last question.
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a hard one. I think that if we consider that Bitcoin is maybe operates like gold, like the digital form of gold, because that's a store of value, then your own personal supply auditability is probably important. The fact that you can validate how much gold you've got in your safe is important. Whether you can validate on an individual basis how much gold exists in the world probably isn't that important. So I tend to think that You know, if we view store of value as an attractive quality, or as a quality to pursue in something like Bitcoin, that shouldn't mean that it has to compromise on privacy. I'm a proponent for Bitcoin adding privacy, if that's not clear already, and I think that it's a great idea to not compromise on privacy just because we think that as a store of value, it needs to have this traceable quality. It needs to have some sort of magical supply auditability quality, which frankly doesn't exist. So trajectory matters in one way, but does that trajectory mean that you should compromise in privacy? I don't think so. I mean, you're not obligated to store your physical gold in, like, you know, in front of a window in a glass cage. You're totally able to store your gold in a safe, and no one knows how much gold you've got. And so it should be the same for Bitcoin, or for any currency, for any digital currency.
Okay, so we have another question from my friend crypto anarchist from Bratislava. So what is the current main drawback that is holding Monero back against other medium of exchange?
Oh, sure. Do we have time for another 30 minutes? I could talk about Monero's drawbacks for ages, because I think it's important to acknowledge Monero's drawbacks. So there are several, and I think that some of the main ones are Monero is very chunky when it comes to things like being able to run a lightweight wallet, being able to sync up a node. It's not Ethereum chunky, but it's still chunky. And even with Monero's pruning, you don't get to prune as much as you do on something like Bitcoin. Very early on, we did actually get Monero nodes syncing up on Raspberry Pis and that sort of thing quite easily and comfortably. Nowadays, it's a lot harder. You know, you need to have a little bit more power under the hood in order to sync up a Monero node. You need to have, you know, a little bit more disk speed than an SD card is going to give you. And that's not to say that that it isn't a goal to keep Monero as lightweight as possible. It's just, you know, these trade-offs have led to something that is slower and heavier in some ways from a technology perspective than something like Bitcoin. Another drawback, and this is a big one, and frankly this applies to Bitcoin as well, but it applies especially to Monero, is Monero's user experience is incredibly poor. Now, there's a lot of work being put into improving that. There are lots of people that are working on new wallets like Feather Wallet that just got released, improvements to Monero's core GUI. There's lots of effort being put into it, but frankly, if you think about it in the timeline, Bitcoin is over a decade old, and only now is usability starting to get to the point where a normal person can even think about using Bitcoin in a non-custodial fashion, not just leaving their coins on Coinbase. Monero is a lot younger. Monero is barely 6 years old, and it's got a long way to go, at least another 4 years in my mind of development. Whether that gets crammed down into less time or not, there's still a lot of development that needs to be done. Software development, user experience, user testing, and cryptography and research on the cryptography and research side of things, in order to get Monero to a point where we can really say the user experience is acceptable for non-crypto people, or people who are not heavily in this. And I'll use one example. I really don't want to spend 30 minutes on this, but one example is Monero's addresses, 96 plus characters. You know, you can hide that in a QR code. That's great, but at the end of the day, it's still a chunky thing. It's chunky compared to Bitcoin, which is, you know, relatively short addresses, and it does scare people when they're like, "Oh, do I need to check every character in this 96 character long address?" It's frightening. Again, there's work being done to improve that. Don't get me wrong, but it is something that that I do think holds Monero back, because it's a little bit frightening. Frankly, Lightning has some of the same problems. You know, a Lightning invoice is also this like massive set of characters, and QR codes do help. But I think that people have gotten used to things like tap and pay. And until we have tap and pay systems for Lightning and for Monero, I think both are going to be held back by user experience issues and a lot of the lack of a lot of usability stuff like that when it comes to making easy payments.
Thanks. Before I'm going to ask you the next question, I just want to ask you: Did you watch the recent presentation from David Friedman he had before you?
Yes, I did.
Okay, because he was criticizing Bitcoin just because of lack of privacy, So, and it was definitely like an extra argument for cryptocurrencies, like a truly anonymous cryptocurrency like Monero. So we have another question. So what are you most excited about that's currently being built research for Monero?
Great question. So obviously I'm excited for Tari, which is being always being built as a merge mine sidechain. But more than that, I think two big things that I'm really excited, or three big things that I'm really excited to see on Monero. The first is the work that's being done on post-quantum cryptography. I think post-quantum research for Monero is pretty exciting. The second thing is the work that's being done on Triptych and how that will affect and improve Monero's privacy. And the third thing are atomic swaps and the research and effort that's being done on atomic swaps for Monero.
Yeah, like a few days ago, I saw some article about atomic swaps between Monero and Particle. Yeah, so it is just
there's a lot of work being done on it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's cool because I invested in Particle and still it doesn't have any value. Okay, so another question. Is Feeder Wallet released already? I cannot find it online.
Yeah, they posted yesterday on the Monero subreddit. I believe the alpha is coming October 10th, which is also my wedding anniversary. And there's a Feather Wallet subreddit already that's been created. So I'd suggest checking the Feather Wallet subreddit for updates.
Okay, thanks a lot. I'm going to ask any other questions from the physical audience. Okay, any online question? Okay, so in that situation, okay, so another question: what are you most excited about that's currently being built research for price on Bitcoin? So not Monero, but Bitcoin.
Sure, cool. Yeah, so quite honestly, and I've been very cautious to wade into this debate. I think that the join market guys and the Wasabi guys are working really hard on stuff, and that's great. But I'm a big Samurai Wallet fan, and I know that might get some hate from some Bitcoiners, but I think the Samurai Wallet guys are doing really good work. I love their attitude in general. It's a little bit, it reminds me a lot of Monero's attitude. And yeah, like just some of the effort that's gone into making Samurai Wallet really easy to use, I applaud. So yeah, that's sort of, I guess on the Bitcoin privacy side, what I'm most excited about right now for on-chain privacy. And then of course, a lot of the stuff that's being done on Lightning. I think that strong privacy on Lightning is still a while away. I probably won't be looking to rely on Lightning from a privacy perspective for a couple of years still, but I'm very grateful for the effort that's going into it right now on the privacy side.
Okay, and it seems this was the last question. So Ricardo, thanks a lot for your comprehensive answer. Thanks that you were able to join our conference, and I really hope that next year you will join HCPP 21.
Yeah, definitely. Hoping to be there in person next year.
Yeah, Prague is a great city. You should definitely visit. Oh, so thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.